Ahoy captains, it's Ty, your trusty XO, and today we're setting sail with War Thunder's FIREBIRDS major update. So grab your sea legs as we have a quick look at the latest additions to our naval fleet. Are they the greatest? I'll leave that for you to decide. We will also be discussing the new visuals and of course those infamous bugs that we all love to hate. By the end of this, you'll have a good idea of what to expect from the new vessels and an idea of how the graphics and UI overhaul will affect your gameplay going forward. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit subscribe as we get started. While we have a few interesting vessels added this patch, the hallmark feature is of course the graphics update. Initially, I was very concerned about how this would affect gameplay performance, with the last few patches steadily degrading the performance on my PC for both gameplay and recording. When I heard that Gaijin was seeking to add support for ray tracing and more advanced graphics options like lighting, reflections, water, changes to fire and explosions, I felt a pang of worry for my GPU. However, I have been pleasantly surprised, actually gaining significant amount of frames per second. I went from about 45 pre-patch to 70 to 80 FPS post-patch, which is great. Ray tracing adds a lot to my visuals, particularly in replays, and despite being on the lowest setting, the game feels much better in terms of optimization. I do hope that you have experienced better performance as well. As with all good things, there are some issues, particularly with unit models. Some character models on the ships are broken. There have been reports of automatic repair being unable to be turned off. And of course, at the moment, the biggest issue is no torpedo trails are visible at any height, depth, or angle. And it does make torpedoes somewhat of a threat. There is a new UI for hits divided into 4 categories, but we'll show you those shortly. There is new UI for the damage X-ray models. And there has been a change to the view positioning for all classes of ships to match where the rangefinder or observation posts are. So now taller ships have a much higher viewpoint. This has sort of increased the scale of the game, I think. Smaller craft now have a harder time seeing over waves and engaging each other, and bigger ships have more of a bird's eye view and you can sort of sense depth more, at least in my opinion. I think this will give battleships particularly much better visibility, and I will show you just examples of scale very, very shortly. We have a bunch of new ships. We have the USS Bagley, the Project 253L, the HMS Repulse, the JDS Murasami, the Caracciolo, the MS 444, and the Dunkirk. I will also show you the specifics of those vessels. So let's have a look at the new features in depth. If all you wanted to know is what's new, then that's basically it. Do me a favor, hit like and subscribe, otherwise stay tuned as we unpack this new patch and see, is it really worth it? The skipper of Bagley seems to think so. Anyone that's played the other free-to-play warship game would recognize this kind of feature. It's basically illustrating what your shots are doing, and it's divided into 4 categories. You have hits but no penetration, partial penetration, penetration with damage, and over penetration, and then pineapple penetration. I personally don't think this is very useful for myself, and I feel like it clutters the screen, but they will be adding the option to customize them and remove them later on. For new players, it may give you a good indication of why you are not doing any damage. Like, a lot of your shells are not penetrating, especially at a sharp angle like this. So it is understandable, and it does give it a little bit more clarity. If I had to pick 2 of them, I would say that non-pen and over-pen are the most important. That way you know that you should probably switch to a lighter shell in terms of high explosive if you're over-penetrating a lot. The second change is an expansion of the X-ray damage UI, and I'm showing you the same engagement here, but we're illustrating the X-ray. And you can see that there are now more sections, and they're pretty self-explanatory. You've got damage mobility, damaged control, damaged primary weapons, damaged secondary weapons, damaged torpedoes, fires in a magazine, detonations of a magazine, fires for the superstructure, whether or not the ship is taking on water, and damaged propulsion as in the running gear. Here is an example of the change in sense of scale. I am in the Repulse, HMS Repulse, and I'm fighting a destroyer and a cruiser. And they look tiny because I am looking down on them from the observation point on the HMS Repulse, which is quite tall. And so it makes these, which are quite large ships, look tiny in comparison to you. It makes the battleship gameplay feel a lot more dynamic. You've got that power fantasy fulfilled. I am worried now that battleships can see over islands, and there aren't many places to hide as it is. Another feature that may or may not affect your naval gameplay, but it'll be interesting to see in retrospect where you went wrong or where you went right, is the shot save system that they've added. Now initially I thought I'd be able to save the entire battle's worth of shots and just see how much damage my ship took, but unfortunately you've got to save them one shot at a time, and it wasn't as useful as I thought it was. In this case I saved the wrong shot and it wasn't the kill shot, so when I tried to replay it, it didn't really do anything. So I wanted to save the shot that killed me. So if you're going to do that, make sure you choose the very last one that your ship took. We have 7 new vessels added with the FIREBIRDS patch, the first of which is USS Bagley DD-386. It was a destroyer named after Ensign Worth Bagley, the only US naval officer killed in action during the Spanish-American War. Launched in September of 1936 and commissioned in June 1937, Bagley played a pivotal role in several key battles of World War II, including Pearl Harbor, Guadalcanal, and the Leyte Gulf. With a top speed of 38.5 knots, she was a formidable force on the high seas and helped protect and escort other vessels through some of the war's most intense battles. Unlike other American destroyers in the tech tree, she can be considered a torpedo destroyer because she has a whopping 16 Mark 15 torpedoes. They aren't the greatest, but when you have so many, doesn't really matter, does it? She is also faster than the Farragut class destroyer, so is better suited for a torpedo run. Whenever I see a new vehicle patch release notes and I see the words project in front of something, I always get a little bit worried, especially for coastal vessels, but today we only have the Project 253, a coastal-based minesweeper, pretty unremarkable, wooden hull, 3 diesel engines, 2 45mm single-shot cannons, and a bunch of 12.7 Dushkas on the bridge. These boats were built for the Soviet Navy during World War II, and they were crucial in clearing the heavily mined Baltic Sea. Also known as the MT class, they were designed under the Soviet designation Project 253 and saw action up to 1945. They have a top speed of 14 knots and are only armed with the anti-aircraft cannons. They were pretty sturdy vessels, and I believe there was only one lost. To enemy action anyway. After the war, some were transferred to the Polish Navy and were later converted into diving support ships. Sitting at 1.7, it's nothing remarkable, and it's really just a roadblock on the way to the better Soviet coastal vessels in tier rank 4 and 5. It is sitting in the riverboat line, so it really, like I said, is a speed bump before you have to play worse ships. Overall though, if you've got good accuracy, you can clap the little boats at this battle rating. HMS Repulse was a renowned class battlecruiser launched on January 8, 1916. Named after the Earl of Repulse, she was one of the fastest capital ships of her time, capable of reaching speeds up to 31 knots. Her construction was a response to the need for a fast, heavily armed ship that could be built quickly during World War I. HMS Repulse saw action in World War I, particularly at the Second Battle of Heligoland and Bight in 1917, where she played a significant role in the engagement. Between the wars, she underwent several refits to improve her armor and armament, ensuring that she remained competitive with newer ships. In World War II, Repulse was initially deployed to the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean with the Home Fleet, where she took part in the pursuit of the German battleship Bismarck. Later in the year, she was sent to the Far East to counter the rising threat of Imperial Japan, and on the 10th of December 1941, she was sunk by Japanese bombers in the South China Sea. Admiral Sir Tom Phillips, the commander of Force Z, made the decision to maintain radio silence and not send an alert until 1 hour after the first Japanese attack. Despite his efforts to evade the Japanese bombers, HMS Repulse was hit by several torpedoes and bombs, leading to her rapid sinking. Much like the event ship HMS Renown, she is a glass cannon. Japan get a more modern ship in the form of JDS Murasame DD-107. the lead ship of the Murasame class destroyers of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. She was laid down by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries at Kobe, Japan on December 17, 1957 and commissioned on February 28, 1959. The Murasame class destroyers were designed as part of Japan's post-World War II naval rearmament program, aimed at creating a modern, versatile fleet capable of both offensive and defensive operations. These ships were intended to serve as a general-purpose destroyer, equipped to handle a variety of missions including anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, and escort duties. The hull was completely renovated from the first generation of destroyers. The superstructure and hull were inclined to reduce radar cross-section, and it made the ship less detectable by enemy radar. The design choice was crucial for enhancing survivability as the modern naval combat era emerged. The size of the hull was increased to reduce underwater radiation noise, and operational efficiency was increased by designing the draft like a mini Orandazaka. For those that don't know what that is, that's called the Dutch Holland Slope, and it's just where the rear of the ship steps down towards the back. It's an interesting and fun ship to play because it differs from Japan's normal destroyer style, and it has two main armaments. The 5-inch 54, which is a long barrel 5-inch gun, and also the 3-inch 50, which is a rapid-fire twin-barrel gun. And together they actually make a formidable armament, although it can get a little bit distracting to try and line up the 5-inch shells when you're spamming 76s. But overall, it's a nice change to Japan destroyers, and it's very reminiscent in both gameplay and design of the top-tier Japanese coastal JDS Ayanami. Murasame is also unique in that her hedgehog system is able to traverse about 240 degrees, and at the moment I'm pretty sure it's a bug, but it can fire all of its complete stores of hedgehog, which is over 140 of them. So at the moment, Murasame is a tsunami generator. I'll be trying to get some kills with that's for sure. Francesco Caracciolo is going to be a super disappointment of a super dreadnought. It was one of 4 ships planned and one of 4 ships cancelled. Of the 4 ships planned, it was the only one to reach any sort of completion and was launched but never finished. As a result, in game it is a bit of a mess in that it doesn't have any other shells besides SAP shells with pretty poor performance, and the only other shell apparently available was a training shell. The upside is it has a fairly thick belt, but the entire ship is basically ammunition. So, I don't know, it's the opposite of a glass cannon. And so without actually putting its survivability to the test, I'm going to call it a Stonewall Caracciolo. Something that probably won't take much damage, but is feeble in its attempts to damage anything else. Placed firmly at 6.7, it performs more like a 6.3, and unfortunately it's going to be dragged up to those 7.0 battles where it will have very little luck really damaging its opponents. People may have differing experiences to me, but for me, I just think this is a poorly placed ship, and it's really just a roadblock to success. I will say that it does have a pretty good secondary armament, an AA armament for a super dreadnought, but I don't see it really being useful for the main meta. It may be a good ship in Naval EC, that we'll have to see. Italy have a new premium in the form of PT boat MS444. I feel sorry for this boat because historically it seems like it just could never find its place. Originally built as PT-94 in New Orleans, it was bound for the Soviet Union as RPT-10. When that was cancelled, it was sent to Britain as MTB-424. Serving for a few years, it was then sent to Italy, where it served for 1 year, transferred to the State Department, and was never seen again. Very sad story. Interesting boat, but it doesn't really offer much and is vastly inferior to the US versions of the 78-footer Higgins. It has 1 Bofors, 2 torpedoes, and 3 20mm cannons, which makes it a lightweight in terms of PT boats. The French battleship Dunkirk, the lead ship of the class, launched on October 2nd, 1935, and named after the port city of Dunkirk. She was designed to be a fast battleship capable of countering the latest threats from other nations. Dunkirk featured a main battery of 8 330mm guns arranged in 2 quadruple turrets, giving her formidable forward firepower. Her top speed of 29.5 knots made her one of the fastest battleships of her time. The ship was designed to be versatile and capable of performing a variety of roles, including escort duties and the hunting of enemy commerce raiders. Pre-war, Dunkirk served with the French Navy's 1st Division and participated in several international visits. At the outbreak of World War II, Dunkirk was part of the Force de Raid, tasked with hunting German commerce raiders in the Atlantic. Stationed in Algeria, she was attacked by the British, desperate to make sure that she would not fall into German hands. Despite the French assuring of the British that this wouldn't happen, the British still attacked. To prevent her capture later by Germans, Dunkirk was scuttled, and the wreck remained in Toulon until it was scrapped in 1958, passing back and forward between different hands. A pretty ignominious end for what looked to be a very promising battleship design. Well, that brings us to the end of another War Thunder video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will upload gameplay of these ships over the next few days and weeks, and let me know what you think of this new format for ship reviews. And also special mention to Jay Deaton, who recently signed up as a member to the channel. Your contribution is greatly appreciated. To everybody else, I will see you in the next video.